Thanks very much for joining us on our video interviews. This one is focused on finding the balance between the technical and the business solution. And thanks very much for joining Fernando and Christof. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, we'll go with Fernando.
Okay, so my name is Fernando Palomo. I've been working in the industry since 2002. And my recent experiences as a CTO are in Grupalia.com back in 2010. After that, before that, I would also mention that I was CTO in a successful startup in Berlin in the Rocket Internet Hub. I also passed through the Skype e-commerce platform, and after that, I worked in CTO in Splendia.com, where I met this wonderful co-host today, Christof. And after that, I've been working as an agile coach for 5 years in Agile, coaching many different business industries. And at the moment, since, I don't know, it's 1 year now here in OneBox. And OneBox is a global distributor, ticketing global distributor platform for promoters who run concerts or football, anything people want to, any event.
Okay, thanks. Christof.
Well, I'm Christof Damian. I guess my original career started in London, where I had a startup for many years, where I was forced into the CTO role. And at some point moved to Barcelona, and in different companies had different technical roles, sometimes more leading, sometimes just as developer. And time at Splendia was especially fun. I learned a lot of things there. And after Splendia, I changed to Devex, where I'm currently in. So I've been there for nearly 5 years. I'm the technical director here. It's an international company with offices in the US, Philippines, and in Barcelona. And it's a website for international development. That's it.
Okay, excellent. So a lot of my work with companies and traveling through various places in Barcelona, we hear that a lot of the solutions, the technical solutions, can be refactored, or they need to be taken away. There's a lot of legacy. And I wondered, what is your experience? Do you think there's more bias towards what would be the business solution rather than the technical solution? So whoever wants to take that.
In the experiences I've had, I would say that there's this bias. However, in most of the times where I've been, it makes sense. Let me explain. When you are prototyping a new business model, something that for some reason you cannot do a proper user experience exploration to get to know whether the market actually likes that product or not, it makes sense to run fast and not to and to leave aside some of the non-functional requirements to develop them later. Basically, because you don't want to spend a lot of time building something that works perfectly and is wonderful, but you don't know if anybody's going to use it. The main problem I found is when it happens that you forget that you delayed the non-functional requirements, and you start considering them as they were never there. You never thought that you were going to do that, and then when it's becoming a problem. But if you are aware that you have just delayed that, then things work fine, it works smooth. And for example, here in OneBox, this company started in 2010 and started like many other startups running and trying to create something new that it was supposed to be really successful, and you don't have the time to build the perfect solution. You just build something that works and people can use. And it was a success. And then you continue building over it and over and over. And at some point you realize that, hey, we need to rebuild these things from scratch. And it happened like 2-3 years ago that the company decided to start building so many new big features and starting to rewrite everything and create a new platform. One of the non-functional requirements that was necessary here back in the day was scalability. Initially, the clients were not so big, so you did not require such a high availability. Well, high availability was already there, but maybe not concurrency. You don't need to have so many people trying to buy tickets at the same time. But nowadays, you know that whenever you want, you have a new event, a new football game, Barça Madrid or Guns N' Roses or whoever. At the moment the sales starts, millions of people come. So when this company started managing years ago these big events, is when we realized we needed to do that. And then a new whole refactor was required. Now in the days, we are in the middle of continuing this refactor because it was not a big bang. We didn't throw everything out and put a whole new thing, but we started putting new scalability components where they were more required. And right now we continue removing some of the old ones bit by bit. This is our technical depth. And it's where we are now as a company. We are spending a lot of our efforts right now. I would say like 2 of our 5 teams are dedicated continuously to improve our platform because it's something we need to do. And probably it's going to be there forever. But it's a decision we made at some point. And we still do that. Whenever there's a new project and for some reason we cannot get the market to confirm whether it's going to be a success or not, or we don't feel sure, then we go for the quick thing. Don't spend so much time in non-functional requirements. Unless, for example, here scalability is not negotiable. Here, anything we do, it needs to scale up to millions of tickets per second, per minute, because it's the business.
Exactly. And what about you, Christof? Is it something similar?
Yeah, I agree that you have to have a balance, and there are also different scenarios. As Fernando said, that if you have a startup, the most important thing is the first working version and getting the money in from investors and prove that your product can be successful. And then later, once you're established, you probably have to clean up the mess you just generated. But once a company is established and is basically just growing out of sales or whatever, then I think you have to care for your technical base because whatever you don't do now will bite you later. You have to go clean by now probably your code base is massive and distributed over different systems. So you have to be very careful what is going on and always weigh what is more important to move fast or maybe later have to stop and go back because a rewrite is the most expensive thing you can do because you always forget all the features that you have implemented maybe over the years you have worked on this before. So I would always discourage from a rewrite of a big project. But sometimes, there's no way around it, and then you have to invest the resources to do it.
Okay.
Something more I learned about that in the last, it was 2013 and 14. I was working as an agile coach and partly agile coach, partly CTO for some time in a company called Codify. And this company was building a platform for streaming, for video streaming. And the situation was that they had a whole platform they had built for 4 or 5 years with amazing tons of functionalities, but it was not scaling and it had a lot of bugs. So they hired me and several other developers to rebuild that platform from scratch. When we were doing that, even though we were, as you said, Christof, we were like stopping developing new features because back in those days everything was building what was there before. We learned that this classical sentence that you say 60% of the software we develop is never used. Well, but there 60% of those features were never used and we didn't develop them anymore. So we launched with only 60% of the functionalities. And I remember we had this platform, I think it was uservoice.com. So when we did the relaunch, it was basically a backend relaunch. The CSS design was not so different, but we had this user voice to gather feedback from users. And the only big thing that users were missing was languages. Hey, where's the Turkish language? We don't have this anymore. Or hey, where's the, I don't know, couple of languages. But functionalities, nobody was asking any one of them. So sometimes it's not that bad, you know. You rebuild something, and if it's not so, in our case, it was not so long because it was like 7 guys, 4 months or something, building that from scratch with TDD, with BDD, you know, with all continuous integration, everything done really well. And in our case, I think it paid. It paid back. It was a really good solution as well.
And how was it? It's very interesting because how did you communicate with the business stakeholders? Because I can imagine that sometimes that could be quite difficult. Yeah, we're going to relaunch, but we're going to take out, you know, all of these features. How was that communication? Was it simple? Was it quite straightforward?
When I lived it, I lived different experiences. One of them, it was a fail because the message from business to developers was just redo everything as it was. You know, that's the scope. Do it the same as it is. Then it was a pain in the neck for everybody, and it was a failure. And the scope, it was continuously growing and growing and growing because nobody actually prepared any kind of documentation or requesting or nothing. It was nothing an agile way, nothing. And in the other projects, it was, for example, in this project in Codify, it was really fun because the product owner himself with the stakeholders, they were convinced that a lot of features were not being used. So it came by themselves, the requirement to put some metrics in the you know, some matrix in the application to make sure whether it's being used or not. But the discussion to rebuild, the most painful discussion for me was trying to buy time, to earn some time to make them understand that this is going to be long, and it's going to take long. So same situation we have right now here, not because we want to, but it happened. Our backend tool is using a technology that is ending in 2021, 22, something like that. So we have somehow a tic-tac, a clock that's telling us, hey, you need to rebuild that. So, and that discussion is, hey, we should start as soon as possible. It's going to be huge. It's a whole backend tool. That's where I have to dedicate more, and it's being more difficult to make understand that, hey, we need to do that, and we need to do it now. But because you don't have any estimation so far, because you know the project has not started, you cannot prove how long time or show how long time it's going to take. But you know from your heart that it is huge. So that's what's happening right now, and that's the most difficult conversation for me.
Christof, any difficult conversations you've had with business people, or has it been you've used your German charm?
Yes, the balance is always difficult. Once there's a decision to rewrite, then obviously we have these problems of the features. Sometimes you have the advantage that the features were requested by people that already left the company, so nobody even knows about them. But other times, yeah, you build a new product and then people expect, okay, that this little thing is missing or this little business logic is missing. My advantage at Devex was that they basically, before I started, they already run against the wall, that the development of new software got slower and slower because the code was not maintainable. And so every change introduced new bugs, new problems. So the business side already noticed this problem, and I could point them, okay, this is clearly not working. So from now on, we keep one level of quality that we can live with. It's always a balance, and the business is always on the different side than the programmers who want like this perfect code, unicorn code, while the business obviously just want new features. So there's always a difficult balance there, and I'm kind of in the middle.
Okay, yeah, it's something I've heard recently for quite a while, that some teams ask for, you know, like if they're using Scrum, they would say, can we have like a backlog for technical tasks? Can we have, you know, what is the percentage? If they're using Kanban, you know, should they, you know, who prioritizes these technical tasks? Are there any tools that you guys use, or how do you balance the difference between, adding those technical tasks and the business ones?
Yeah, maybe I can say something. What I tell the developers, so they often want to create tasks like refactor this, refactor that. Mm-hmm. And I say that this is not going to happen. First of all, nobody will ever move this into a sprint. Nobody's interested in it. So if you want to refactor stuff, then calculate it in the things you're doing at the moment. And that's the only sensible part from a program perspective too, because you don't want to work just on refactoring. You want to improve the code and then refactor as you go. And I tell them, yeah, just do it. Same as you write unit tests, you do it in the tasks you're currently working on. And you're just not going to mention this ever. It's just part of your work. It's not, there's no separation between refactoring, writing tests, documentation, moving stuff in Jira around. That's just your work. And you have to estimate it with everything as a piece. And that works to a certain point. Obviously, then sometimes you have something, okay, we're using Elasticsearch, and we're going to have to go to the next version at some point. And this is a bigger project. It doesn't involve just one programmer working on one task and then just switching Elasticsearch. This is a lot of people will be involved, infrastructures involved, and so on. Mm-hmm. And this is then a project that will be prioritized like business projects. And I'm basically the cheerleader for these projects where I say, okay, this is important. It's not urgent, but we have to do this maybe in the next half year and we have to schedule it. And I'm, like other teams too, they have to cheerlead their projects. I have to do this for these kind of projects that are maybe longer than a month or so and need a couple of people attached to it.
Okay.
It's a difficult balance, and I'm not saying I'm always getting it right, but yeah, that's how we're doing it at the moment.
Okay, and do you have to go with a lot of data to convince the business stakeholders, or is it a question of trust?
I mean, obviously there are some arguments that help me. So if there's a security issue, it is nice. If there's maybe features that we can use with the new version that we can't use with the old version, I have to argue with it. The same as one business team has to argue with the other team about the business value of something. I have to also say, okay, this is valuable now. And it's hard work. That's why it's good to do a lot of these things continuously if you can, because you're never going to go back and say, okay, yeah, we did this really badly and now we do another sprint and do it better. Because it is also a bit, while everybody dreams of this, it's a bit unrealistic in my experience that this is really a helpful thing to do.
Yeah, I would say also that, as you said, the Boy Scout rule also always works. As you know, if you get to that file or that class or that method, leave it better than you found it. That always works and it pays. And the other one I've used, maybe it's the same as you said, is to link new features to refactors. So this new feature, if you need this new feature done, right now it's going to require this effort and in the short term, or maybe it's not even feasible because with the actual code base we have, it's not going to work. And we need that refactor. So if you're going to ask this new feature on the next quarter, let's face this refactor on this quarter. Let's not leave it for the future. And also, basically, it's linking the refactors to new features that we need, or to bugs that have been reporting on the last period of time. So let's say we have this part of this component that during the last year we have been reported, hundreds of bugs related only to this component. So basically, this is what we are trying to avoid in this case. It's not just refactoring because we feel comfortable or we want to be happy. It's just because we want to avoid these new features, these new bugs being reported again.
Okay.
It's always linking it somehow to a business metric, not just because we feel comfortable or because our life is going to be easier.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it also comes from the lean idea that, I mean, if you have this, maybe you have this idea that's a good idea to have a backlog for refactoring, and then you have a lot of things to refactor, and you start to make them really shiny and beautiful. But in a half a year, maybe this part of the system will be deleted, and now you improved it without adding any new value. So it's a waste of time, and it's better, as Fernando said, that you do the refactoring when you need it. You do, okay, I notice I work on this thing. We had done something similar before. We merge it together, we refactor it, we use common parts. Then it makes really sense. And then that's also the moment when you're in the zone and can focus on the issue. If you are completely coming externally, maybe someone created the issue, we have to refactor this, and then someone else comes in and says, okay, I'm just going to refactor this, but you don't really have a goal where to go with your refactoring. You need to see the problem that you're going to solve with the refactoring.
That being said, managing that, we've also keep a backlog, but it's the same product backlog. It's not a refactor backlog on the other side. It's the same backlog. And for big things, we have them in the roadmap. So let's say we were removing active MQ, we were moving everything to Rabbit, and that was part of the roadmap of the background team. But for these minor refactorings, we keep time also on each one of the teams. They know that they have to allocate time for this refactoring as well. So yeah, it's a mix of both things. And also in refinement, when the discussion is happening, is when I tell people, hey, try to find out what's the benefit. It's not just because you.
Okay. And do you guys use any tools to check that benefit? For example, there's things that is it's more readable, or it's easier to change. But do you use anything like Sonar to say, hey, look, or look at the logs, error logs or whatever? How do you show afterwards that it was useful to the business people, or do you need to show? Maybe they trust you implicitly.
In my case, it always depends on what was the benefit you were proposing, that what you were saying it's going to have. If the profit was we're going to have less bugs, then you just have to go to your back fix tool. And if the benefit was that then we can develop this new feature you wanted to have, then you can just go there. So it always depends. It's not. I definitely would not point business people to any tool like Sonar, because they're not going to understand, and they probably might get confused. I don't know, if you show Sonar to some business people and they see, I don't know, 14 blocking alerts, they might get alerted and scared, and maybe it's not that bad. You can live with that for a time. So these are tools to show to someone who actually have been explained properly what everything means.
Okay.
Yeah, I also just try to show the high-level numbers. So if there's a big improvement to something, speed, number of errors, or these kind of things, I show to the business people, but usually I don't. Or reducement of costs, like if we suddenly save 10 AWS servers or something like this, then I present that, but they tend to trust me that I do roughly the right thing. And for things like refactoring, the only measurement really that we have is in the code reviews, if the other people agree that it's a good change.
Okay.
Yeah, my screen just blanked. Yeah, so we have some code metrics, but they are not 100% helpful for some of these things.
Okay. And are there any big decisions that you've taken, whether it's more to go towards the business solution or to do a large refactor? Are there any big decisions that you regret taking in your long and illustrious careers? Silence.
Obviously there are. I just have to think of them. Yeah, one of the things that when I started at Devex, So we had a big monolith application, Ruby on Rails, but it was in a nearly abandoned version of Rails and Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
And now the decision was, do we refactor this, bring it to a current version, or do we start from scratch and move features over? And I was in the beginning of the idea that it's better to refactor it, to bring it to the new version.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out this was extremely complicated to do because it was already so massive. And now we switched to a new system. And I think maybe I should have tried harder on the refactor, because we run into these problems of missing features, trying to understand a lot of code that someone else has written a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, at that time I was very young in the company, so I didn't really know where to go. But yeah, that was maybe one of the decisions. I'm sure I can think of more later. I mean, you can't always make just the right decisions. The most important thing is that you decide on something and then stick to it, and not constantly flip one or the other. Because yeah, that's what you're there for, and then later you have to live with the consequences. Some other things, maybe better decisions. When I started, we had the beginning of a micro architecture. So we had some services in Node.js, and people were trying out the idea of microservices and different programming language and so on. And I put very early a stop to this, because our team size just doesn't allow to have many different languages at the same time, and also many repositories, and just the overhead was so high that it was difficult to handle. So we moved all this code into the new system, rewritten it basically from Node.js into Rails. And that was I think a good move, and could have also gone the wrong way, because I might have said, okay, this is it's nice to have this separation, but it was on the edge, and there were some people in favor of it and some against it, and yeah, in the end it turned out to be the right decision.
Okay. What about you, Fernando?
Yeah, I've
Sorry, can you come just a little bit? Fernando, can you come a little bit closer?
Sure. I regret myself many times, but I forgave myself as well. Things happen, as you said. But some of these experiences of these learnings might be, for example, in Valia. I remember when I joined the company was based in Magento, but it was managing a massive amount of data, and the platform was not working. And we knew that we had to start building again everything from scratch, but because the business was growing so much, and it was kind of, it was a parabolic growth, we didn't know what was the top. So we ended up discussing with business, trying to figure out what were the future numbers of scalability and volumetry for the platform. And basically we ended up building something that could compete with the Apple Store, because in the numbers of sales per minute. So it was insane. So we had to build a masterpiece of engineering there, which never was, it was too much than what business actually expected. So yeah, it took a lot of time to build that. We were somehow, responding to what the market was supposed to need from us. But I always told myself, maybe we have been more more safe. Maybe we would have taken shorter time, and we wouldn't have wasted so much time doing this. Yeah. But you never know, right? Because you never know. If we go for another solution, maybe we would use other technologies, and you never know. But the feeling was that we did what we have to do, all of us. I mean, the company. This is not business versus technology. It was the company. We made the decision we needed to take in that moment. But maybe it could have been a bit more not so ambitious on that.
Okay.
And that was a good learning. But as I said, I forgave myself and forgave the context as well, because hey, it was you never know.
Exactly. Okay, and just to close up a little bit, is there any advice that you would give to a developer who is maybe in a team using Scrum, and how can I get my product owner to prioritize these technical tasks, or how can I explain? Is there any advice that you would give to developers to be able to make those changes and to be able to communicate with the more business oriented people? Whoever.
I can say what I said before is, and I really reinforce this idea of linking any technical thing you need to do. You have to link it to the what's the business benefit of this, whatever it is. There's always a benefit. I've never seen a developer saying that I just want to refactor this piece of code because I feel happy about it, and I want to rewrite it in another programming language because I want to learn that. No, it's never like that. There's always a reason behind it, and it just takes time even for us developers to think of that and to realize that, hey, we want to do this piece of code because it's gonna allow us to get to there. So that's the point. So somehow a developer, he's also a stakeholder. You are a stakeholder. So as a stakeholder, you have to convince your product owner, and your arguments need to be in the product owner language, not in the developer's language, and in the product owner goals and what he's trying to achieve.
Okay. Christof, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that you're in a healthy environment where you can make these decisions without getting punished. And I always tell the developers I work with, if you do like this small refactoring on whatever you do, your brilliant code, just don't tell the PO. Just don't mention it at all. It will be visible in the velocity and in the planning, and it will come out in the grooming also. If you estimate it higher, there will be discussion what you think is necessary, and a lot of things can be handled like this. But if you're in an unhealthy environment and you already feel bad about doing good code, then you probably should find a new job, because this is there's no solution for that. If the only requirement for business is features, and then at some point they complain that the features getting slower and slower, there's not much you can do. And if you're in a healthy environment, then also talk to your lead, to your tech lead or CTO about the bigger issues. Find a forum internally and find a champion in your team that can. Maybe you're not so comfortable to talk to business people. Then find someone in the team that you push in front of them, and he does the cheerleading and the stakeholder part of this work.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I love the part of having a safe environment that people should be able to. These conversations should be able to take place, because at the end we're all in the same boat, and we all want the best for the product, and part of the product is the technical solution. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks very much for your insights and your experience.
Thank you.
Until the next time. Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see you.